2005 season for the Jamestown Jammers saw as its manager Mike Mordecai. Mike spent virtually 10 years in the majors, playing with the Atlanta Braves, the Montreal Expos, and the Florida Marlins. During that 10-year tenure, he was able to achieve 2 World Series rings. He brought to the team an awful lot of professional talent. And at the end of 2005, Mike was called up to be an active player with the Florida Marlins, an extraordinary feat, as probably there is no one in the history of the New York Penn League who went from being a manager to being called up to the active roster. During the August 1st homestand against the Aberdeen Ironbirds, Mike wasn't the only former major leaguer on the field. The manager for the Ironbirds was Andy Etchebarren, a catcher who had an extraordinary major league career spanning the golden era of the Baltimore Orioles.
Number 29, Jose Zapata. The second baseman, number 4, Francisco Guerrero.
Way to work, 1-5. Doing a good job up there, big guy.
Paige and Danielle are joining me out here right now for a reality check. Frozen t-shirt race. Girls, you're gonna run, start right here with me. You're running down to Jordan. There's 2 frozen t-shirts. You need to unfold them.
43 years ago, Andy Etchebarren began his pro baseball career playing in South Dakota for Aberdeen of the Class C Northern League. Now he's still in pro baseball and again involved in Aberdeen, but this one's in Maryland. That's where he's the manager, as we mentioned, of the Ironbirds of the Class A New York Penn League. In between the Aberdeens, Etchebarren had a 15-season major league career that included 4 World Series appearances in 7 years with the Baltimore Orioles and garnering 2 All-Star selections. After finishing his career playing with California in the Milwaukee Brewers, Andy Etchebarren was a coach in the major leagues for the Brewers and now back with the Baltimore Orioles. We're going to have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Andy Etchebarren, a man who lived during many of the golden days of the 1960s and 1970s. You started off in Aberdeen, 1962.
Aberdeen, South Dakota.
South Dakota. So here you are, 40-some years later, another Aberdeen, Maryland, and a guy who's been in baseball for over 40 years, done as much as you've done. What is it that kind of draws you to this kind of business, this baseball business?
Well, I think number one, it gets in your blood,
right.
You know, and you have love for the game, and then you have love for teaching the game. After you played for some good management, you learn quite a bit about baseball. But you know, I can see until I can't do it anymore, not because of the money or anything else. You know, I got out of baseball for 2 years, and I played golf probably 5 times a week, 2 years, and finally I decided, you know, if this is all you're going to do with the rest of your life, it's not too good.
Scott McGrady was here a couple years ago with the Babe Ruth. He's involved very much with the Cal Ripken League, and we've had the Babe Ruth World Series here, and of course reflected fondly on the years of which, of course, they overlap with yours as well. You're involved in 4 or 5 World Series?
4.
4?
Mm-hmm.
2-time All-Star?
Mm-hmm. First 2 years in big leagues.
And as you reflect back on some of those highlights, I noticed one of the things that I'm not sure many people have brought up is the fact that at one point you actually saved the life of Frank Robinson in a swimming pool. What were the circumstances of that?
Well, we had, I forget what year, might have been 66, probably was 66, that we clinched the American League. At that time there was no divisions, and we clinched the American League, and Steve Barber, one of our pitchers, had a good friend that had a nice house with a big pool, and he gave a team party for us after we cinched the American League. And you know, we all were celebrating and we were having a pretty good time, and all the families were there, kids and wives, and Frank and everybody, you know, got a little high and had a little bit too much to drink, and guys were throwing each other in the pool, clothes on, and so Frank decided he was going to go in and put his bathing suit on. Well, told nobody he couldn't swim.
Oh my gosh.
So the pool was a little different pool. It had a shallow end, and then it went straight down to a deep end. So he was in the shallow end, and he got on the ledge and went down, and no one seen him. So we were standing by the side of the pool, and I seen him at the bottom of the pool waving his hands. At first I thought he was messing around. Then he stayed down. I looked at him 20 seconds later, he was still doing it. And so I dove in and went down, and he grabbed me really tight, and I didn't have a very good breath, so I knew he was in trouble. So I got away from him, went up, got a breath, went down, got him, took him out, and he was okay.
Jeez, that's scary.
Yeah, afterwards it was scary.
Yeah.
Something could have happened.
In the trade that rocked the baseball world, Cincinnati divorced the former National League MVP on the grounds that he was an old 30. Buttoning up his Orioles jersey to start the 1966 season, he was an angry number 20.
Bauer said, hey, go on up and take a swing. Well, Frank's right off the airplane. He didn't much care about it. Wait a little while, you know, he'd take his BP and get everything going. And you know, it didn't mean a thing. It was just a pickup game going on. And finally, Bauer said, hey, go on up and take a hack, you know. So Frank, against his better judgment, but what the heck, it's his first day with the ball club, and he wants the guys to know that he's as, you know, as regular as anybody else, so he did. He walked up there and ripped a line drive double into left field corner, right off the airplane. I thought to myself, maybe we've got something special here, and we did.
I turned to somebody and I said, I think we just won the pennant, mainly because I thought Frank would make that kind of difference on our ball club, and 49 home runs, he did.
Frank Robinson came over here in 1966 and won the Triple Crown, which no one had done in years and years and years. Not only that, but as Brooks Robinson often said, we had a good ball club. Frank taught us how to win.
Robbie wasted no time. In the first 3 games of 1966, he homered. He knew how to go get the ball, too.
He was the manager on the field. He was the judge. He was the police officer. He was the principal out there. When you didn't do things right, when you did not play and give your best, when you made boneheaded plays, Weaver did not have to say anything because Frank was there to let you know.
Frank stood right up there on the top of the plate and knew he was going to get hit a lot, did get hit a lot, took it, went to first base, but he got a lot of them back, you know, and by home runs and a lot of other things. So Frank was just a tough guy. I mean, he always had that reputation. When he came over here, that's just the way he played. So that was a real plus for the Orioles.
I was shocked, hurt, upset, and stunned. I just didn't understand why the trade was made. But after I thought about it for a couple of days, I said maybe the best thing for me in my career to get a fresh start in a new city, a new team, Baltimore had been close a couple of years in a row. I said, if I can go over here and do what I'm capable of doing, help the team, maybe we can get over the top.
At season's end, Robinson was the American League's most valuable player. His anger had wrought 49 home runs, 122 runs batted in, and a .316 batting average. Not bad for an old man of 31. It seemed there was nothing Frank Robinson couldn't do on the field or even in the clubhouse.
Kangaroo Court is something that, of course, Frank Robinson was the judge of the Kangaroo Court, and any cases that came up, we made quite a lot of money that we donated to charity. I know at one time Earl Weaver might put a runner in to pinch run if he to steal a base. If he got thrown out, Earl Weaver got fined for making a bad move, that kind of thing. We impeached Frank one time. He was, of course, the judge, and the judge never got fined, so he was really laying heavy fines on all of us throughout the year. So we impeached him for one day, and I think we got him for about $300 or $400 in one day. The whole court was just Frank Robinson Day. We got back with him.
Boog's going to celebrate a birthday up in Seattle, and we're going to be at such and such a hotel. If you feel like sending him a card or a wire or something like that, you know, feel free. Wish him a happy birthday. Didn't make any difference, you know, didn't seem like it was a terrible thing to do. We got fined by the Kangaroo Court for contributing to the downfall and the physical condition of an athlete, because every time the phone rang would be another message that they wanted to know if they could bring it up to Boog, and we were interrupting his sleep.
What I was trying to do is try to help my teammates be the best players they possibly could be, because the managers sometimes don't have the time to stop a player and talk to him about some little mistake. But what a little mistake can do is become a big mistake, and the big mistake's going to cost you ball games. And down the road, you don't want to lose ball games, you should win.
Winning the pennant by 9 games, the Orioles were still a long way from ultimate victory. Standing between them and the World Championship were Sandy Koufax, Don Drysdale, and the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Much involved in the 1966 World Series, which you guys won. Dick Brown had a little bit of a...
He had a brain tumor. In spring training, they found it. He had bad... When we got to spring training, I thought I was going to be the backup catcher to Dick Brown, and Brownie came up with some bad headaches that spring, and so they sent him to a specialist, and it ended up that he had a brain tumor. So he couldn't, they knew he couldn't play that year, and Hank Bauer called me in, Harry Dalton called me in, and Harry Dalton was a farm director before that year. It was his first year as general manager. He knew I could catch and throw and work with pitchers, and they told me it didn't matter what I hit as long as I could work and catch and throw and work with pitchers, young pitchers, which we had, that I would play every day and they wouldn't go out and trade for a catcher. Right. So it gave me confidence, and I knew I could do that. And so consequently, I hit better than they thought I could hit, and we won. I believe we won the American League that year by 9.5 games. I think that's what it was, and then we swept the Dodgers that year.
Was it 33 straight scoreless innings?
Yeah, they scored off McNally in the second inning, or in the third inning. Let's see, McNally pitched 2 in the third innings. They got a run off him in the third inning. Drabowski came in and shut him out for 6 2/3, and then they never scored another run. Yeah, it's 33 innings, a little over 33 innings.
Phenomenal.
Predict such things gave the young birds scant chance against the defending champions. Perhaps they didn't consider the damage a single surname could deliver. The Robinsons belted back-to-back homers in the first inning of Game 1. The O's went on to a 5-2 victory. The next day, precocious Jim Palmer, just shy of his 21st birthday, engaged one of the greatest pitchers who ever lived. The loping right-hander handled Sandy Koufax and the Dodgers 6-0 to become the youngest hurler ever to throw a World Series shutout. In fact, after Game 1, the Dodgers never touched home plate again. When the series traveled to Baltimore, Wally Bunker and Dave McNally followed the path that Palmer blazed, also shutting out the worn-out Los Angeles. Frank Robinson smacked another homer in Game 4 and added World Series MVP to his resume. After 12 years back in the big leagues, the Baltimore Orioles were world champions.
When Blair caught the ball in center field, or the championship was ours, well, I just took off for McNally, you know, and jumped up in the air. And to this day, my kids still think that was trick photography. You know, they said, "You never jumped that high in your life."
came back on a bus coming back to the stadium. There was a big sign out on 33rd Street that said, "Would you believe 4 straight?" And we all kind of giggled and laughed at it.
So I felt like we could beat them in the series. I didn't have any idea about 4 straight, naturally, but I felt like we had as good a ball club as they had, if not better, and we could beat them.
Frank's presence helped everybody out. I mean, it helped Brooks a lot, and it helped me a lot. It took a lot of the pressure off of me, knowing that I had to hit a home run every time up. And, you know, Frank was up there, and I was hitting behind Frank a lot, and then Frank would hit behind me in certain situations. And it was a real treat hitting around Frank, you know, because everybody knew you couldn't walk anybody to get to Frank because he was going to take you deep. So I was just sitting all over stuff, man. It was all over fastballs right there. That was the great part of it.
I'll never forget going back to the hotel on the bus after the first game. Not too many guys on the bus, but among them was Dave Johnson and Luis Aparicio. And they kept talking about the celebrities that the players had seen behind the dugout, movie stars and things of that sort. And somebody mentioned Frank Sinatra was there. And Davy Johnson said, "Where was he?" And they said he was sitting in the second row of the right behind our dugout. "You didn't see him?" He said, "No, I didn't see him." Luis Aparicio spoke up and he said, "Hey, you know C. Sinatra, how are you going to see that Koufax curveball?" The records of baseball will indicate that Dave Johnson got the last hit that Sandy Koufax ever gave up.
Here's with Sandy Koufax, and I guess you have the unique distinction of really, you were the last out for Sandy Koufax in his career.
Right. I was the last man ever to face Sandy Koufax, and I hit it in a double play. But at least I hit the ball off it. That was 66 World Series, and
right.
I believe he was 25-4 or 5 that year, and ended up retiring after that World Series. Of course, I seen him after that, and I know why now, because he pitched in such pain. To this day, I don't think he can straighten his left arm out his elbow. So he was in a lot of pain and still was 25-4. That's pretty good.
And you have a distinction. You're the record.
And Davy Johnson's the last guy ever to get a hit off him.
Is that right?
Yeah, right before me, and then I hit into a double play.
Have that ring on your finger, and
yeah, they're put away right now. Yeah, I have 2 winners, and 70 and 66, and my oldest daughter, when I leave this wonderful earth, she'll get the first one with a World Series bat. It's signed by all the players. And then the second one, 70, my other daughter will get.
Tell me about 1969. Here, the Baltimore Orioles were really on top of the world, and were certainly the favorites against the Mets. And you actually win the first game of the World Series.
Well, you know, we had a phenomenal year that year. We won 109 games, and that was a great ball club. And 69, 70, 71 were all great ball clubs, but you know, we went into that series very confident.
Amazing! 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 Amazing!
Amazing!
Amazing! Asombrosos!
Amazing could only describe the New York Mets. In 1969, baseball instituted divisional play and the championship series, and the Mets, once baseball's laughingstock, won the pennant. Tom Seaver and a young pitching staff led the way. The expansion Mets had never finished higher than 9th, but New York was in for a treat. The 69 series put the Mets against the Baltimore Orioles, touted by many as the strongest team since the '61 Yankees. Winning the National League pennant had been a triumph indeed, but beating the Orioles might take a miracle. But miracles were at hand, especially the gloved hands of Met fielders. With the series tied at a game apiece, Baltimore's Elrod Hendricks bats with 2 men on. Mets center fielder Tommy Agee comes to the rescue, saving at least 2 runs, maybe more. In the 7th, Paul Blair bats with the bases loaded against Nolan Ryan. Another shot deep in the gap, this time right center field. It's Agee's second incredible catch of the day, and this one saved at least 3 runs. Tommy Agee had prevented 5 runs, and the Mets won 5-0. But Game 4 would feature more. 9th inning, ace Tom Seaver leads 1-0 as Brooks Robinson bats with 1 out and runners at first and third. Out of nowhere comes right fielder Ron Swoboda. The tying run scored on a most unusual sacrifice fly. A replay shows again how incredible this grab really was. Many consider it the best World Series catch ever. Clearly, the amazing Mets and Ron Swoboda could do no wrong. In the bottom of the 10th, the vaunted Oriole defense takes on characteristics of the Mets of old, as a bloop double puts the potential winning run on second. Pinch hitter J.C. Martin is ordered to bunt. Martin runs to first inside the baseline, and the throw hits him, a controversial play. The winning run scores, and the Mets now lead 3-1. All New York is caught up in the fairy tale. In Game 5, Jerry Koosman gave up 3 early runs, but the Mets come back to take a 5-3 lead. And in the 9th, Koosman needs only 1 last out. The amazing Mets are world champions. A miracle, perhaps, but also the product of timely hitting, tight defense, and stingy pitching that held the Orioles to a 146 team batting average. A great win for the New York Mets and manager Gil Hodges.
We beat Seaver opening day, and you know, I think maybe we got a little overconfident, maybe, but we didn't usually get overconfident. We just went out and played hard every day, and we knew our talent would show. I don't think anybody let down. We really didn't get any breaks the rest of that World Series. Swoboda went after a ball he should have never went after, and he caught it. He was not a good outfielder, and he made a great catch. Agee made a great catch on left center. Pete Rickard hit I forget who it was, J.C. Martin going down the line on a ball in front of the plate. He was definitely inside the line. He was on the grass. The umpire didn't call him out. Frank Robinson got hit with a pitch, and they didn't call that. I mean, a lot of things went against us in that World Series. And then, of course, Koosman, Gentry, and Nolan Ryan threw pretty good, too. We didn't know that much about them. We knew about Seaver, but those other guys threw pretty well.
Did you get a sense on that one play where I think it's Cleon Jones, the scuff ball? Were you close enough to see what was going on there?
Well, you know, that was another play that, you know, I don't know if that ball went in the dugout. They could have put shoe polish on it. Who knows what happened? I mean, rub it on their shoe and throw it back out and argue the play. But nothing went right. After that first game, just nothing went right. We weren't meant to win that thing. But, you know, we dedicated ourselves again to the next year, and we come back and won 108 games the next year and beat Cincinnati 4 out of 5. So, you know, they were great ball clubs.
In 1970, Baltimore manager Earl Weaver got another chance. His staff of Jim Palmer, Dave McNally, and the clever screwballer Mike Cuellar all won 20. And the Birds took the pennant by winning 108 games. The 1970 World Series was rated just about even. It was a classic matchup of heavyweights. Cincinnati's slugging Big Red Machine and the Baltimore Orioles, who did everything well. One look at MVPs Johnny Bench and Boog Powell told the fans what to expect. But to Frank Robinson and the Orioles, the series meant something extra. The Mets had made them feel like victims of a practical joke. So Robinson and company took out their frustrations with long power blasts. Also, for Robinson, 5 years earlier, he'd been traded to Baltimore from Cincinnati. But this series is remembered primarily for a third base glove and another Robinson named Brooks. From the umpire's first call of play ball, the Reds found themselves meeting up again and again with the man at third. Any fan who watched the human vacuum cleaner in the '70 World Series had to believe he was the best defensive third baseman ever. Cincinnati pitchers were also odd. Brooks had a .267 lifetime average, but in this series, he batted .429 with 2 homers. This one-man show spelled doomsday for the Big Red Machine. Game 5, and Mike Cuellar looks for the final out, which will crown the Birds champs. And Storybook Justice directs the ball to the right man. The Orioles' year-long flight to vindication is over. But Brooks Robinson's performance in the spotlight of intensified national exposure is just the first in a series of such in the 1970s.
Ball clubs.
We had such a terrific pitching staff. Was it 70 when you had the 4 20-game winners?
Yeah.
Yep. Pat Dobson, by the way, started here in Jamestown.
Right.
Did you get a sense that...
Did you get one of these?
Here you go. You want to give this to them?
Oh, yeah. Give it to the guys over here?
Yeah.
You need it back, right?
No.
You don't?
Nope.
Okay.
That goes to their manager.
Okay.
All right.
Did you get a sense that, even as 71's coming by, that this was sort of a team of destiny? I mean, you had...
Earl Weaver was what a manager ought to look like. Short, angry, florid, impatient in temper, a character, like a great many managers.
In the middle of the 1968 season, the Baltimore Orioles got themselves a new manager, Earl Weaver, a former minor league second baseman who never learned how to hit. It was the beginning of one of the most successful managerial tenures in the modern age. Weaver was a brilliant psychologist. He loved to bait umpires to inspire his team. And he was thrown out of 91 games, a major league record.
Yeah, I will. Oh, good. Don't think I won't. Your finger off. You hit me? So do it again and I'll knock you right in your nose. I didn't touch you. You pushed your finger. I did not. No, you're lying. You're lying. No, you are. You are lying. You're a big liar. You are a liar, Earl. You are a liar. You are. You had your hands on me. Nah, that's wrong, Earl. Wrong. Smile on your brother, everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Come on, people now. Smile on your brother, everybody get together. Try to love one another right now.
When you talk to Earl Weaver, he would put you right in the middle of the baseball situation that you wanted to talk about as a writer, and he would tell you everything that was involved. And usually when he was doing this, he would be stark naked in his office and eating a leg of chicken or something like this, but a little pint-sized man with no clothes on, talking baseball with his eyes all alight. Wonderful.
I'll always remember Earl sitting in the dugout before a game with a cigarette cupped in his hand like a little boy sneaking a smoke, and his fingers all yellowed by the smoke, telling a story and not realizing that they were playing the national anthem. And after the national anthem, I apologized. I'm sorry I'm still here. And he turned to me and he said, relax, kid, don't worry. We do this every day.
Under Weaver's leadership for 14 full seasons, the Orioles would win or come in second 12 times, win 4 pennants and 1 world championship. The Orioles were good at everything. In addition to the power hitting of Frank Robinson, they had the incomparable third baseman Brooks Robinson, who would win 16 straight Gold Glove awards and set major league records for games, putouts, assists, and double plays. But it was their pitchers that set them apart. And Earl Weaver was a genius at coaxing fine performances from each one.
Should have been over on first base. Now we should have 2 out. Let's see you go to work.
His pitching staff included Cuban-born Mike Cuellar, a master of the screwball. Left-hander Dave McNally, who once won a record 24 games in a row. And a young, temperamental right-hander, Jim Palmer.
Jim Palmer always inspired Earl Weaver to great fury. Palmer really essentially never won a game for anyone else. Palmer's complexes had complexes, and Earl somehow intuitively understood how to motivate Palmer. And I honestly believe that if Jim Palmer had not pitched for Earl Weaver, he would not have won 50 games in the major leagues.
Concentrate on getting the other stuff and keep yourself in here. Come on. 1 run ain't gonna do it. That's just what we need to wake us up.
Palmer would go on to record 268 victories, win 3 Cy Young awards, and have 8 20-game seasons. Earl Weaver's Orioles had all the makings of a dynasty.
Similarly sort of kind of sneak up on you?
Oh, no, the Pirates didn't sneak up on us. They were a very good ball club. I mean, you go around their ball club, they had some pretty good players. Manny Sanguillen was catching. Willie Stargell was there. Bob Robertson could hit. And they had a lot of good, they had a lot of good players on that team. And Steve Blass pitched out of this world. He stayed on the corners the whole thing, and he pitched very well. And they didn't sneak up on us. They were a very good ball club. They beat us in 7 games, and Clemente had a great series.
You ever seen anything quite like that series? I mean, just one individual. Clemente seemingly was...
Well, he was outstanding. There's no doubt about it. And, we had won 3 games at home. They had won 3 games at home, and they finally beat us the 7th game. So it was a good series, and, one thing, the Mets beating us, but I never looked back at Pittsburgh beating us. They were a very good ball club.
The Orioles won their division by 12 games and went on to the World Series to face the Pittsburgh Pirates of manager Danny Murtaugh. The Pirates could run, hit, and score with the best of them, and were led by right fielder Roberto Clemente, who had hit .341. Clemente was a 4-time batting champ, and in 17 years had compiled a lifetime average of .317. The '71 series was only Clemente's second, but it became his national showcase. Against Baltimore, Clemente showed it all and gave his all, even on a tap back to the mound. At age 37, this tireless performer reached the high point of his career. Clemente collected 12 hits in the series, 5 for extra bases, while batting .414 for a Pirate team that only hit .235. He was not known for his long ball power, but delivered 2 home runs in the '71 series. The second homer came in the Pirates' 7th game 2-1 victory and enabled Pittsburgh to come back from a 2-0 deficit to win the World Series. The next season would be Clementi's last, and his final hit was a double that gave him the coveted total of 3,000 hits. A tragic plane crash would take Roberto Clementi's life only 3 months later.
They were a very good ball club.
As you reflect back during that kind of time period, the Andy Etchebarren and you all-star for twice, you have certain guys you reflect on and say, that's the best I've seen. Whether it's the best pitcher you've seen or the...
Well, I was fortunate to catch a lot of good pitchers. Caught a lot of 20-game winners. Went to California in 1975, middle of 75. Got traded to California and was able to catch Frank Tanana when he could really throw hard. And he had great control of his fastball. He had a good curveball, very young pitcher, 21 years old at the time. Caught Nolan Ryan there. Nolan Ryan with great stuff. But, you know, I caught a lot of very, very good pitchers, and I was very fortunate to have those guys to catch. They made me a better catcher. And Dave McNally was outstanding pitcher for the kind of stuff he had. You know, people ask me, all the guys I caught, Palmer was outstanding. I mean, he won almost 300 games. And Cuellar was outstanding. But they asked me who the best pitcher was I ever caught. Well, a lot of the guys I caught had such great stuff that they should have been great pitchers. Dave McNally was a great pitcher without great stuff. And so he's probably the best pitcher I ever caught.
Right. From the other side, as you're catching and you're seeing this guy come up to the plate and say, oh my God, not him again.
Well, no, you know, I never felt like that. With our pitching, I felt, I mean, there were some very good hitters in the league, but we tried to control it, you know, with the pitching we had and the defense we had. I mean, we had great defense all those years. I mean, you couldn't, we went from, Brooks Ramos was there the whole time. We went from Louis Aparicio to Mark Belanger at shortstop. We went from Davey Johnson to Bobby Grich at second base, and Boog Powell was there the whole time. He never got credit for the kind of first baseman he was. We had Paul Blair playing center field. I mean, you couldn't hit the ball over Paul Blair's head unless it went out of the ballpark, and he played one of the shallowest center fields I've ever seen. You couldn't, you couldn't take an extra base on him. I mean, you could not shoot you had to shoot the ball through that infield if you got it through. So, you know, we never felt like there was hitters like Frank Howard that we wouldn't want to hurt us in a game situation, but to go after the L, K lines, and K line, I'm not taking nothing away from hitters in the American League, Yastrzemski's and all those guys that we played. But did we pitch them in? No. You know, we had a plan what we're going to do with them. Did they get hits off us? Sure, they got hits off us. But they, you know, very seldom did the best hitters hurt us in game situations. We went to another hitter, pitched a guy really tough. He had to hit our pitch. And our pitchers were that good, not to throw the ball in the middle of the plate too often.
One of the great ask Andy Etchebarren to fill in the blank. The funniest thing that ever happened to me was, what would you say?
The funniest? Oh, I don't know what the funniest thing would be. Steve Mingori one night in Cleveland struck me out with the bases loaded. And at that time, Steve Mingori did not have really good stuff. And I was kind of embarrassed. So I went and hit around in Cleveland between where the helmet rack was. There was a little spot there, so I got kind of in there. I was a little embarrassed that he struck me out.
How about an incident that you saw out there, or incident or two that you said, man, I can't believe that actually happened?
Well, you know, I seen...
Baseball's loaded with that stuff.
Well, no, you know, when you play with a Brooks Robinson and taking nothing away from Paul Blair, I seen Paul Blair make some most incredible catches you ever seen. And after a while, you know, it's like Brooks Robinson. He's look up, and there the ball was, and he'd throw him out by a step, and didn't have a great arm, but he always threw him out by a step. And, you know, it's like that World Series he had against Cincinnati. The people that watched that World Series watched him play third base, and Brooksy said it right, you know, after it was over, that, you know, on TV, I make those plays all the time, and he's right. We didn't, I mean, it was normal to see him make those plays as a teammate. But the fans on TV all over the country never seen a guy play third base like that. And his statement was, you know, I make those plays all the time during the season. It just so happened there was so many of them hit in a short series. And he said it right on the nose, because he did make those plays all the time.
Yeah.
In 1970, the Cincinnati Reds faced the Baltimore Orioles in the World Series. The Reds were young, aggressive, and powerful, led by Pete Rose, Tony Perez, and Johnny Bench.
3-1 pitch to Bench. Drilled. A line shot that Brooks Robinson dived and grabbed it. What a play.
But the Orioles had the best third baseman in baseball. Brooks Robinson was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, was discovered playing ball in the church league, and was beloved by Baltimore fans. He was 33 years old in 1970, a veteran of 15 major league seasons, winner of 10 Gold Glove awards. He was called the human vacuum cleaner. One by one, he destroyed the hopes of Cincinnati's vaunted hitters. Lee May.
Power hitting right-handed. Jim Palmer's pitch. There's a drive down the third base line. Robinson dives into foul territory, up with it, off balance throw to first, and he got him.
Tony Perez.
It's the one hopper to third. Brooks is going for the double play, steps on the bag for the fourth. Here's the throw to first, and it's a double play.
Johnny Bench.
Smashes it right to Brooks Robinson at third.
Johnny Bench again.
Full hitter. Robinson dives to his left of one-hander. What a play by Brooks Robinson.
And the Golden Glove artistry of Brooks Robinson was never more apparent than on that last play.
The Orioles took the series in 5, further helped by 6 runs batted in by Brooks Robinson.
The pitch and a long drive to left field. That ball's going, it's going, and it is gone. A home run. Robinson is doing it all. By far the outstanding player in this 1970 World Series.
Brooks Robinson, Cincinnati's Pete Rose said, belongs in a higher league.
Andy Etchebarren, here you are managing.
Well, I don't know if there's a role model. I learned a lot from Earl Weaver. I try to pay attention to Earl Weaver, even though sometimes we didn't get along too good, but most of the time we got along, and Earl was like that with all his players. He got along with everybody most of the time, and nobody sometimes.
Right.
But, Earl had a meeting right off the bat when he took over in All-Star break 1968. And I played for Earl Weaver for 3.5 years in the minor leagues, so I know Earl Weaver for a long time. He's still a very good close friend of mine. I see him every year at fantasy camp. But I think Frank Robinson learned a lot from Earl Weaver. I think a lot of guys learned a lot from Earl Weaver. And the one thing Earl Weaver said, he says, guys, I think we have the best team. We're going to make a run in '68 after he took over, and we did make a run that year. Detroit got us right at the end. I mean, we almost caught Detroit that year. And then in '69 it all started. But he said that you guys outplay the other team, and I promise you I will not be outmanaged by the other manager. And he was very serious about that, and he took that to heart, and you could tell he was an intense manager. I think a lot of his arguments and get thrown out of games, not so much that he tried to do that. I mean, I really don't think he tried to do it. I think he was in the game so much, and he was so intense that when something went against us that he thought was a bad call, he couldn't control himself, and he went out. Mm-hmm. And I think that's exactly what happened. I don't think none of that stuff was planned, and I think all the shows he put on were just things that come out what he did.
Years were two men who shared nothing in common except winning. One was tall and lean, the other short and stout. One was eloquent, the other earthy. One was Cy Young, the other see you later. No wonder they got along so well.
Baseball players are together more during the summer, a baseball team, than each individual would be with their wives. And when you're together that much, there's going to be some arguments. Jimmy and I had some dandies.
If I was going to describe Earl Weaver to somebody that had never seen him, obviously he was a short guy. He was like 5'6", which is why we never saw eye to eye.
About when to take him out, when to leave him in.
You know, he looked at himself as being a very positive guy, but there was nobody more negative ever that managed.
Who the umpire might be that night and how we're going to handle the umpire.
I mean, one day I walk a couple guys in the first inning. Belanger makes 2 errors, which didn't happen very often in the same inning. Boog loses the ball in the sun, and they get 2 runs. And during the middle of the first inning against the Twins in Baltimore, he walks out to the mound and asks me if I'm trying. And I go, am I trying? I said, you made out the lineup. I said, why don't you go ask, Belanger over at Troy? Walk out there now, Earl. Go out there, ask him if he's trying, because you put his name in the lineup and he's made 2 errors. I said, or better yet, why don't you go ask the heavyweight over at first, if he meant to lose that pop fly in the sun. I said, he may squash you.
After we had clinched the division, I told Palmer he was starting the first game, and Palmer said, I'm not starting the first game. And I said, you're starting the first game, Jim. He said, no, Flanagan deserves to start the first game. Flanagan's going to be the Cy Young Award winner, and he won more games than me. And I said, Jim, you've had the experience. You've been through it. You know what you're doing. You know the hitter's inside out. You're starting the first game. Well, it caused a feud.
The great thing about playing for Earl Weaver is that when you knew you were going to spring training, first of all, he's going to take the best 25 players. He wasn't going to have Harry Dalton or Frank Cashin or Hank Peters tell him who were the best 25 guys. I mean, Earl was going to fight for the roster he wanted, and he had the kind of power, even though he had a lot of one-year contracts to do that, because he could be argumentative. And number 2, you knew that you had a chance to win.
So I would have liked to have been close to a lot of the ball players, and especially Jim Palmer, because Jim is one of the cleanest livers you'll ever see and one of the most intelligent people to talk to.
I never would have gotten into the Hall of Fame without him. At times it made it very difficult. But, looking back, gave me every opportunity to go out there and win a lot of games and lose a lot of games. He had a very simple philosophy. In most years, till late in my career, he didn't think there was anybody better in the bullpen. So why bring anybody in?
I guess there were a lot of them that, don't even come to mind anymore. Important at the time, probably, to one of us. Probably never important to both of us, because one of us might have been laughing at the other guy all the time in some of these arguments.
Their stormy relationship had its ups and downs, but no 2 men were more instrumental to the Orioles' sustained success than Jim Palmer and Earl Weaver. Palmer's slow, graceful pitching motion seemed an exaggerated thing of beauty until it climaxed into the exploding high fastball, hard to lay off, impossible to hit. Despite career-threatening injuries, he won 20 or more games 8 times and the Cy Young Award 3 times. In the best season of his career in 1975, he won 23 games with a paltry 2.09 earned run average.
You ever see Earl when he gets out there and puts his hands back this way? Then you know he's got something he wants to say. Finally, the home plate umpire came out to the mound. And Earl turned to the umpire and he said, look, he said, this man has won 20 games in a year, 8 years. He said, where do you want him to throw it to get a strike? You're gone.
If Palmer couldn't get along with his manager, he certainly had less to gripe about than the American League's umpires. The O's skipper was a cantankerous, obsessed genius with a hair-trigger temper, and nothing set it off like an umpire's mistake.
Until something happened in a ball game, you're the calmest person in the world. Well, you're on edge in a 1-to-1 ball game, but, an umpire hasn't been part of it. I'm on edge because I want my pitcher to throw a strike. But in that 1-to-1 ball game, and a guy slides into second base, opponent slides into second base that I think I'm out, and my shortstop jumps up, boy, there it is. There's a ball game out there.
I got pitches that other catchers did not get. Not because of me, but because of Earl. Because they reached a certain point in the game when they did not want to hear Earl's voice.
He had a couple run-ins with the umpire. And finally went out to the mound, and he was talking about something to do with in the rule book, and the umpire saying, well, he said, I'm right, and Earl, so Earl, he ran into the clubhouse, and then he came back and he had the rule book. And out on the mound, that's when he tore the rule book right up on the mound, you know, and said, we're not going to play by the rules. We don't need this rule book. Just kind of threw it up on the pitcher's mound.
But as fiery as Weaver was, he could also be cool and calculating. Keeping meticulous files, he was ever aware of his batsmen's performances against each enemy pitcher. When the game was on the line, he was at his best. No matter who was pitching, he always knew.
Is there a highlight for Andy Etchebarren?
Oh, probably the '66 World Series. The press saying that we couldn't win coming out of spring training with 3 rookies up the middle, myself and Davy Johnson and Paul Blair all made that team in spring training. And not only made the team, we made the starting spots.
Sure.
So there was a lot of press that the Orioles should go out and trade for some veteran-type guys up the middle. And Jerry Hoffberger was a first-year owner. Harry Dalton was a first-year general manager. He was a farm director. He knew Davey. He knew myself. He knew Paul Blair. He knew what we could do. He knew for sure that all 3 of us could play defense, and that's what the press was worried about, if we could play defense. Well, there was no problem us playing defense. The question was how much were all of us going to hit. And we all contributed to that ball club. So I think, and then sweeping the Dodgers when we were such underdogs, when they had Koufax and Drysdale and Osteen. And I think that was a highlight of my career the first year.
Speaking of home runs, you were involved in a game where there was just a ton of home runs, 4 of them in 1 inning, as I recall it. Was that you had a, was it 4 in 1 inning, or I read that in one of the sports things where you were part of a montage of guys.
It had to be in Boston.
Boston, yeah.
I think that we had a game in Boston where we hit 8 home runs in a 9-inning game, and they were hit by 8 different guys, and 4 of them were in 1 inning.
Yeah. What was the pitch that got you out?
Well, there's no doubt about the pitch that hurt me the most is when they came up with a hard slider. I had real trouble distinguishing the spin between the fastball and the sliders, because it was, you know, the slider is almost as hard as the fastball, not quite as hard, but probably 5-6 miles an hour difference. The curveball didn't bother me because there was so much difference. I could pick that up, and the slider was a very tough pitch for me.
When you talk about, is there an all-time list? You've seen just about everybody when you can kind of go around and say the best first baseman, the best second baseman.
No, not really, because I never got into comparing players, and when you start saying this guy was better than this guy and this guy was better than that guy, you know, I think comparing players that are really outstanding players, you know, I think Brooks Robinson is the greatest third baseman I've ever seen, but if people seen Cletus Boyer play over a period of time, they'd say Cletus Boyer is probably the best third baseman they ever seen. It goes on and on. You know, people have seen Ozzie Smith. Might say Ozzie Smith's the best shortstop they ever seen. Well, I seen Mark Weininger and Louis Aparicio. I would think one of those two was probably the best shortstop that ever played defensive shortstop. So, you know, I really don't get into comparing players.
Being on so many teams, have you found that there has been a trade or somebody who's sort of been added into the team which has sort of made a substantial and quick difference? Like, well, you picked up Frank Robinson.
Well, see, I wasn't there. I was there for a month, September of '65, but you know, I didn't really know the makeup of the Baltimore Orioles that much. I was there the last month of '65, come up in September as a 20 or 21-year-old, I forget what it was. And, you know, Frank Robinson came over that winter to the Orioles. Brooks Robinson says to this day that we'd have never done it without Frank Robinson, not only because of his ability to hit. I mean, he was a great hitter and a great player and a determined player, but I think that he taught all the players with the Orioles how to play hard and how to, I remember him saying that to the players, guys, everybody in this room can contribute to winning, and you don't have to do it with your bat every night. If you get a base on balls, break up a double play, give us that extra at bat, or make a great defensive play. Block a ball with a man on third base. Throw the base stealer out when it's a winning run, you know. And I think he kind of taught everybody winning, how to win in all aspects of the game, not just with a bat. I think that's what he did.
You had a few managers. You had Dick Williams, you had Earl Weaver.
I don't compare managers either, and I really don't want to get in a conversation about Dick Williams.
Fair enough. When you went traded to the Angels, was that tough? Did that hurt you?
No, it didn't hurt me. I asked for that trade because, in fact, I was very thankful to the Orioles. They didn't have to do that. They traded for Earl Williams, and I went from a platoon catcher with Elrod Hendricks to the third catcher because Elrod was left-handed hitter. And I put a lot of years in with the Orioles, and I went to him and I said, you know, if that's your plans for me as a third-string catcher, you know, I don't think everything that we've had together here, I think it's time for me to probably move on. And Frank Cashin was very good about that. He was a general manager at that time. And Harry Dalton was in California at that time. He moved on to California, and I lived in Southern California. I lived 30 minutes from Anaheim Stadium. So I asked them if they could move me to the California Angels so I could be close to home with my kids and my wife. And June 15th, they did that. So, you know, I have nothing but respect for the Orioles for doing stuff like that.
Ryan, fastest?
No, I caught somebody who throws harder than Nolan Ryan, although Nolan Ryan did throw 100, 101 when I caught him.
Who's that?
Steve Dalkowski. He was a left-handed pitcher in our organization.
Oh, sure.
In this organization, and I'm going to guess he probably, they didn't have the guns they had today, but I'm going to guess he probably threw 104, 105.
No, he didn't necessarily have good control, did he?
No, he did not have very good control.
How did anybody ever dare dig in?
No.
Andy Etchebarren.
I don't know. See what happens next year. I like the roving. This year, I've roved for the last 2.5 years, and I was roving this year with the catchers and work with pitch selections and with the catchers and receiving and blocking and throwing. I kind of enjoy that. And Buford went with our friend Frank Robinson to Washington this year, and this was his job. It happened kind of late, and the Orioles asked me if I would do this the second half. I told them I would do that. I'm 62 years old, and this is really, on the field part, is really a young man's game. It really is. And I think the managing part is probably about done for me. I don't know if I have the energy. You have to have a lot of energy to stay with these kids all the time. And the teaching part I can teach, that's not a problem. I like teaching part, but going out and throwing batting practice every day and going out and hitting fungos and getting in the bus at night like tonight and riding 8 hours on a bus. And, it's just that I could probably do it, but I don't know if it's beneficial for me to do that.
You're running down to Jordan. There's 2 frozen T-shirts. You need to unfold them, put them all the way on. Arms through, head through down, and then run back here to JJ, okay? On your mark, get set, go!
This has been terrific. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
Okay.